Okay, welcome back everybody to our live call. Uh, Hello Ben, give me your hand. Shake.
Hello?
Yeah, hello. Let's shake hands again.
Wait, is that
Yeah, that's very good.
my thumb is
Oh, wait, I have to. We have no. We are. Yeah, right hand. No, give me your left hand. Your left hand.
okay.
No, that. Yeah, this way. This way. Yeah. Okay, and now, yeah, let's
Okay.
shake it. Okay,
Okay.
very good.
Like we're in the same.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
We are in the same room. For everyone who doesn't know. Welcome back to my
Yes.
podcast slash video stream, and we do the experiment. We are in the future now, Ben. We are the future
Okay.
of the metaverse. We have a live Skype call, and to celebrate that, we actually discuss
Hmm.
Star Trek, but the real Star Trek. Not all the Star Trek that we have now, which is not Star Trek anymore. I really believe that, but we talk about the next generation and about episode one. What is episode one
So
about?
so orthodox, not reformist Star Trek.
That's right. We are the ones who have the right belief in Star Trek. So what is episode one about?
It's an introduction. It's an introduction to the second season, or sorry, the second series of Star Trek. The different characters, and harkens back to some parts of the original series and the idea that there is an unknown problem that the crew has to resolve. It's a puzzle. There is an antagonist, um, but the antagonist is in the background. Right? The antagonist isn't the the driving story. Right? He set things into motion, um, but it's not as though there's one villain and the resolution is to beat the villain, right? Um, the resolution is to form a better understanding of the world around themselves and better interact, better learn from the people around them, whether that's the people who are, members of the same group or different groups that they're interested.
Yeah,
Does
I
that
mean,
cover it in?
yeah.
Yeah.
So what actually surprised me at the beginning, so it's the introduction of the new crew. It's the introduction
Mhm.
of all of its members, of Picard, the captain, and maybe we can also sometimes explain who's who because I'm also not that good on it. And I actually saw that episode before. I just remembered because I saw these all these shows during my childhood, and then I remembered, and I was really surprised because I never watched them in order. But the first episode,
Right.
they meet this alien race where they don't know what it is, and it's the Qs, right? The Qs, and I thought that just came in the middle of the show, but they had that right from the beginning. So what is it about these
Yeah. No.
Qs?
Well, so the original series had different omnipotent beings or creatures or characters whose technology was so far advanced that what they did seemed like magic, right? I don't remember whether that was Asimov or another speculative science fiction writer who said that any race that was sufficiently advanced, their technology would seem to appear to work like magic. Um, So the very first and the very last episode of The Next Generation center around this godlike being. Um, and there are lots of fan theories about it being a reference to another character, Trelane, in the original series. And the character plays sort of a trickster role, right? Like, so he plays on like older trickster mythologies of um, a creature with unstoppable or unlimited or unknowable power that is the protagonists with the heroes, and in some ways either trying to encourage them to learn about themselves or see something different about the rest of the world. And at the beginning of Encounter with Farpoint, Q says, I'm putting humanity on trial for its barbaric nature or its uncivil nature. And the protagonist, Picard, says that he wants to refute that he thinks that humanity has developed over the course of 300 or 400 years and isn't, a savage or whatever expression, the antagonist uses. And that's the reduction. Sorry?
I was just coughing. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. I should have looked over and then I would have known.
I actually turned off my
So,
microphone,
uh,
but so like yeah, then you just like what?
no, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean it's very interesting with his Q. So I didn't understand like whether he puts the Starship Enterprise on trial, but it seems he puts whole humanity on trial, and he's the judge,
yeah,
the I don't know how we call it in English, the accuser.
jury and
Oh,
executioner.
the yeah. So
Yeah, judge,
and
jury,
yeah, and
executioner.
I don't understand what is the goal. If they fail, like Picard can convince him that they are not just judged immediately, but that they get another chance to prove that they have developed from being a barbaric and wild race to an enhanced race that is
Hmm.
now in control of itself in a certain sense. So Picard can convince him of that. But like, what would be the outcome if he can't convince him? Then humanity's just eradicated, or do you remember?
I haven't seen the first episode recently. I've seen it quite a few times though, and I think the last time was probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I think like the instructions were to just go home, right? And or there was some vague threat along the lines of or face destruction or doom or something that wasn't entirely clear. So it wasn't that the Q was threatening genocide or eradication. I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But rather um, just giving a vague threat and then implying that this being was omnipotent or relatively omnipotent, um, and that unless it could prove otherwise, that humanity should not leave its own star system.
Mhm. What I find interesting is that Q never entirely occurs to me as the advanced race that he demands humans to be. Do you have an opinion on that?
No. Um, I mean, in some ways, again, like he exists as a foil, right? That he is on one hand criticizing primitiveness and yet is behaving in a way that we would consider gauche. Like I think in the next episode with Q, hiding Q, somewhere in I think the second. No, it was still in the first season. Um, Q shows up and he does his magic, and at the end of the story, um, he leaves and Data's checking a clock or chronometer and is saying, "Oh, well, all of these things happened, and it looks as though no time has passed." And then he asks Picard, "How is it that the Q can be so deft, so capable when dealing with things like space and time and manipulating those things, and then seem so completely oblivious to what are considered simplistic human social mores?" And then Picard, chuckles and wisely says, "Oh, well, perhaps those are the more complicated things." Um, so, yeah, in terms of like their development, um, I think that's deliberately kind of left open. Like they don't exist as exemplars of what humanity should be.
Mhm.
Um, when the species was talked a bit more in Voyager years later, um, they were described as being impolite or having lost what other races would consider social graces. Like they would just show up unannounced and without asking if they were infringing on someone's privacy. And then other episodes where they were described as being mischievous or creating havoc, or that the Q that's the John Delancey Q that's being introduced was specifically more problematic than the others. of his race. So yeah, it's vague. I don't have a specific answer other than to go back to what I said about the character, the race existing to sort of play to like the trickster mythologies in different human myths. That there's a story where we would learn something about the heroes because of the trickster god that they would have to meet and either deal with or grow from because of.
Yeah,
But the trickster god itself is sort of outside of that.
yeah.
Like they're just this removed entity that follow rules that we don't understand or don't have access to.
I mean, the Q race is also a race of another dimension. And I think in one episode I remember from my childhood, they are described as infinitely bored because they have already seen everything that could happen and there's nothing interesting that they could do anymore. They just sit on their porch and wait for the end of time. But somehow Q is fascinated to deal with Picard, and Picard is here standing for the whole human race. What would you say is his motivation?
So, the episode you're referring to, it's same one with the social graces. It's from Voyager. It's not from the Next Generation. Where they visit the space that the Q live in, and they call it the continuum. And I don't think, I mean, it is another dimension, but they just call it something outside of space and time where they exist. And there's discussion about them being evolved to the point where they've explored everything, they've seen everything. There's nothing that there is for them that they can't know. And that's why the boredom. So with the engagement with Picard or Janeway, like I don't know what a good in-universe explanation would be beyond that it was entertaining to John Delancey's character. But a friend of mine said that he had a sister or a cousin who was writing different types of Star Trek slash or fan fiction. And that in her writing, she liked playing with the idea of, and that sort of harkening back to Greek myth, the idea of godlike figures falling in love with humans. And that in some ways, that gives some sort of meaning to them, even though they define that would be different than how we would understand that. I mean, in Greek mythology, when they talk about gods falling in love with humans, it was very obviously sexual. I feel like the Q Picard thing, it's not, right? There's a fascination there. But if you were to talk about it, and I didn't ask this friend for a link to his sister's writing because I think that would have been quite interesting. Yeah. But I think there's sort of talking about a species or a race or beings that are almost godlike, where time is meaningless and how they define themselves as living is radically different from how we would understand that. Like I feel like it's almost like some contemporary conversations about what future AI might look like in terms of its cognition, right? So Noah Yuval Harari talks about possible like machine-human hybrid futurist sense, and how if there are different limiting factors that might affect how we understand relations between people or emotions or different types of connection. And so I think if you look at like the Next Generation and the Q as like, or their portrayal of the Q as a way of looking at that which by definition is unknowable, that which is, a step beyond us or several steps beyond us, then the idea of one of them falling in love with something anachronism. That, that like that, I think that makes more
Mm,
sense.
mm.
Although maybe an alternate explanation that it could be love in the sense that we might have love for a pet, right? So I mean, it's hard to say how that connection gives Q meaning, but clearly it gives that character keep coming back.
Yeah.
Although, again, as we said before, I haven't followed the last series because I've been a bit dismayed by some of the reviews, most of the reviews.
You were dismayed by the reviews.
Yeah, well, I mean, hearing the reviews of Picard, I
Oh yeah.
want to see the series
Yeah, Picard is
because I
really,
felt like,
it's a mess. You know, and this is
yeah,
what I see in this original first episode and also episode 26 that we are going to discuss. They are so calm and slow moving and they focus on contents. For the modern
yeah,
Picard show, yeah,
contemplative.
I think for the modern Picard show, it's just like, first of all, to connect action scenes by different plot lines and to make these plot
Yeah,
lines as interesting as possible by adding a lot of twists. And I think this is also, it also speaks for the
yeah,
modern mentality of nobody wanting any spoilers. Because it's like the idea that the
right.
quality of a movie consists of all these complexities, twists, and turns. But in Star Trek, it,
Yeah,
like Picard, it just becomes an absurdity. So let's come back to the first
yeah,
episode, however, because I think that the Q figure or the idea of Q is the perfect background for the general theme of Star Trek that also contrasts very much with Picard, because the general theme, as I describe it, is the description of a new humanity, a race that we have evolved into. Yeah, would you like to reference that a bit more?
yeah. So I think there are a couple of Barack Obama speeches or interviews, rather, not speeches, where he talks a bit about, and I'm not sure, I think this is a reference to an older American president, like from 100 or 200 years ago, um, where there's a speech that someone had given, or one of the American presidents had given, about humanity trying to live by its better angel. Um, or Barack Obama had specifically used the phrase, trying to be our best selves or the best version of ourselves. Um, and in the original series, several times, Kirk, like I only watched the original series for the first time last fall. Kirk had talked about humans existing with multiple conflicting impulses, and that some of those were very obvious, like very clearly acknowledged to be destructive. But for humanity to survive, like survive our own, nuclear holocaust or Holodomor or genocide, that we had learned to, if not live with, our worst inclinations or our worst impulses. And so again, like with the better angels or better selves that Barack Obama would reference, I think it was a reference to that idea that there are lots of situations where we have choices, and making the right choice or the choice that's good isn't necessarily the most natural to us, right? That's something that requires deliberation and intention and effort, but that it's effort that we don't always succeed in putting forth, but that we could try to or should try to. And so yeah, with the next generation, because it was continuing that conversation at a later point, or I think Gene Roddenberry was trying to continue that conversation of, if humanity is to survive, it needs to either grow beyond or develop in such a way that we're able to control or withhold or restrain our more destructive impulses or our more um, violent or instinctive or fearful impulses. Um, so yeah, with the next generation of this is humanity 3.0 or humanity 4.0, where we've moved out of a tribal state and fights over religion, and we've moved past different industries and conflicts over, how to divide productivity due to industrialization, and that we're at a point where, in some ways, like humanity, even though it's presented as being without religion, is in some ways more spiritual, right? Like there's more, maybe not spiritual, but that it's acting from an inherently more contemplative place, which I think also speaks to the tone and the pacing. That was something that was able to be, whereas now, with a lot of modern shows and with Picard, that's not something that's emphasized as much, right? That's something that's just let go of.
It's not even emphasized, it's entirely forgotten. You sent me this clip where in the old series they were discussing drug addiction, and they were very skeptical of drugs, and they were surprised how people could take drugs. And the son of Beverly Crusher, his name is Wesley, am I right? Yeah. So he asks, like, how could people take drugs when it obviously makes you addicted and destroys your lungs, for example, in the case of smoking? And they explain to him, well, you won't see the negative side effects immediately. And he says, yeah, but I know that they come later. So why am I going to do that? And then in contrast to that, we have like the modern Picard show, where what was her name? I've forgotten her name.
Rafi.
Yeah, Rafi. No, not Rafi. Was it Rafi?
No, not. Curly hair.
Yeah. What was her name again?
Yeah. And she was drunk and stumbling, but she'd given a compelling speech, and then you see Patrick Stewart clapping, and I felt like that's not Patrick Stewart playing Jean-Luc Picard, that's Patrick Stewart just being Patrick Stewart with another actor, right? Or another performer. And again, I haven't seen the series, I've just seen it in clips and commentary on the clips. It was.
Yeah, and then you have,
when I was in my undergraduate. Go ahead.
You also have the other captain of the other ship. I'm just watching Picard for entertainment, so I don't remember any names or something. But like there's the other, I would say, South American guy. He looks a little bit more or Latino, as you say, maybe in America. I don't know what is politically correct here. And he,
what's the name? Rios, who's the captain of one of the ships.
Yeah, and he smokes a big cigar, right? And it's just cool with like a wound in his shoulder, and he's just representing a cool, real character as they have to present it nowadays, because shows are about real characters, characters that you can really relate to and that have flaws and that are not just perfect. So they created all of these characters with all these twists and turns in Picard. But is that really what our understanding is nowadays of a quality show?
Like, I feel like the person in a large chair or throne or motorcycle with a cigar, that feels very 1950s to me. Like 1950s James Dean, sort of that sort of aesthetic. So seeing it now in 2022, like I feel in some ways there's been lots of social progress in the last 20 years. And then in other ways, so many other things haven't changed, right? Or they've regressed in some ways. and there's more discussion about whether it's racism or sexism or xenophobia, and in some, particularly in the States, in some places that can be acknowledged as an issue much more, but then in others that's people are clinging to that very aggressively. And so, I mean, the show, I think one of the issues I had, whether it was with respect to drug usage or prejudice or inequality, like wealth inequality, was that with the 90s shows, it presented and didn't always explain why it was utopia. It was just, oh, well, we've solved this problem, right? This doesn't exist for humanity anymore. And it was sort of presented as an ideal, right? Like it's not the world we're living in now, but it's the world we want to imagine our world becoming like, right, someday. And so in a sense, like that sort of message, that sort of ideal or role of the show, that was clear. And if they presented like a flawed past world or a flawed, image of humanity past or humanity's past, that was where they would use an allegory to give social commentary about the world we live in today. Whereas I feel like Picard, like several people involved in production have said, oh, well, they wanted to show that it isn't the same Federation as the Federation that they showed 25, 30 years ago, and that things have slid backwards. And as a TV show, it seems to be it is commenting on the world we live in today.
Okay.
And while I think there can be value in that in some places, but that's not what I want to watch Star Trek for.
No.
Right? Like when I was in my grad and I watched.
It is also absurd because on the one hand, the Picard humanity looks already so altered and changed that they are completely removed from our 20th century thoughts. So you wonder how it can be in like a span of 20, 30 years, just moving back so drastically to our old life form.
Yeah. Well, and I think and I know you haven't seen this, but in Lower Decks, I enjoyed it just because I think it's cute, right? It plays on different millennial anxieties and references the old shows without trying to be any of them. And in one of the episodes, one of the characters says, oh, well, of course we're concerned about you. We're all the same here, right? We're all treated the same here. And it's an officer or a senior officer to a junior officer. And then someone else says to the senior officer, actually, sir, they live in a hallway. Right? They're obviously not all the same. And like that scene, it seemed to imply that there are two worlds in the Star Trek universe, or in that version of the Star Trek universe, where you have one side that is post-scarcity and has everything they need, and they spend their time striving towards higher ideals, and then you have another world that is struggling, right? That is not there yet. And I almost feel like as social commentary, I don't know whether Picard is trying to, like the show Picard is trying to suggest that humanity is backslid from this unimaginably perfect future to like today within the space of 20, 30 years, or if it's suggesting that maybe there was always that sort of division, but that we didn't see that some parts that were enfranchised or that were privileged didn't see parts that had problems.
Yes.
And I think
that's a
Deep
very good
Space
point.
Nine kind of,
Because I wanted to make exactly that reference. In Deep Space Nine, you have a space station where different cultures meet each other, and I think it is especially the meeting between the Ferengis and the humans. I feel that's a major plot theme of Deep Space Nine. Now, the Ferengis, how to locate them in the Star Trek universe. And I think, so I have to admit, I didn't rewatch the first episode entirely. I watched like 1 hour and 10 minutes. And I think they meet this gigantic spaceship. And I think in the end, I can remember from my memory, I believe it will be the first meeting with the Ferengis. And I remember that I watched it in my childhood and I already felt weird about. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I remember that they came like with a kind of whip or something, like an like a laser whip, like from Star Wars or something, and they were like shown like as really weird. But I haven't watched the whole first episode. I didn't see. Is that scene in the first episode? Do I recall that correctly?
No.
Oh, that's from another scene. Okay.
They're not introduced until later, and they do have the whip thing, the blue whip. But in the first season, there's discussion between Picard and the station, like that, whatever that species is. And Picard wanted to ask some questions about the origin of the Farpoint station and how the technology had developed and where they got it from and why it was so much more advanced than the rest of the technology that they had. And this person, as an empty threat, said, well, if you're not interested, if your people don't want this, then we'll talk to this other race, the Ferengi. So they're referenced in the first episode, but they're not seen until later in the season or in the series.
So I regret I had to set up the Skype thing, right? I regret that I didn't finish like the first episode. Can you tell me what is this gigantic spaceship about? Is that clarified or is that like solved in the first episode?
Yeah. So again, I haven't seen it in 6 years, but I've seen it a few times. So spoilers. It turns out the spaceship was originally the city. It was the outpost. So the reason that Picard and the crew were there on this planet was to look at this outpost and talk about the Federation making use of it or using it as like a planet-bound space station or spaceport for future trade or movement in the area. I don't remember if they used the word trade in the first episode or not. But there was discussion about humans being present there. And then the mystery, so spoiler, the mystery that the characters end up solving is that this other spaceship comes and starts firing on the outpost, but on the village around the outpost. And everyone's wondering, who's this alien? Why is it attacking? Or this alien race in the spaceship? And then as the series progresses, like the end, or sorry, as the episode progresses, not the series, they realize it's not a spaceship, and the outpost isn't a space or a physical building. They're both some type of species, like there's some sort of alien that's able to change its internal shape so that they look like spaceships or like, outposts, like cities. And Troy in the end says, oh, they're mates and they're in love and there's, gratitude, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
They've been reunited.
She feels gratitude suddenly.
Yeah. So the space, that the alien that they helped free or help liberate. But the Ferengi, and I'd forgotten this until you mentioned that, they were referenced in the first episode, but they weren't seen until much. So with Deep Space Nine, because the Ferengi had been presented as being, they were supposed to be the main series antagonists, and then with the first episode with them, just the production didn't work the way they thought it would, right? Like they seemed more comic than villainous, right? They're supposed to be evil capitalists running around this. Gene Roddenberry, fun fact, wanted to write in as part of their backstory that they were all the men it would be enormously well endowed. But apparently several people said, "Oh no, you can't put that in there. This
Wait,
is supposed to be
what do you mean by well endowed? Like, what does that mean?
like 30 cm." Like that was actually in some of the production
What is
notes.
cm?
Centimeters. The
Centimeters?
men were like, because like the entire race was really short,
Oh,
but they had huge,
huge
right?
penises?
And supposedly,
Did I understand huge penises?
sorry,
Wait,
yeah,
wait, wait.
30, like they were all supposed like 4 feet high, right, or 5 feet high, and so that was actually, something that Gene Roddenberry had wanted to be included, and it was just dropped completely.
I
I
mean,
can't see your expression. I can hear you.
yes. I mean, I remember that there were actually kind of two fathers of this one son, right? Like the one who was like a bit more obedient, and the other one who wanted to make a lot of money. And that already seemed to me implying a kind of homosexual relationship. But I may be wrong on that.
Do you mean with the Frankie or?
Yeah, I mean, on Deep Space Nine, I mean, there was never a mother. Was there a mother around? I don't remember. There was just the uncle,
Yeah.
and was there a mother?
So, yes, there was. Those characters were all presented as being heterosexual, mostly. Um, so it wasn't two fathers, it was an uncle
Yes,
and a father.
yes, but there was no mother, right?
And the father, so the father wasn't as concerned about money. He was a really intelligent engineer, but very socially
Yeah,
awkward, and said that he cared about money, but he was really bad
yeah. But
at it.
wait. There was no mother, right?
So one episode in Deep Space Nine, the father character was thinking of marrying a non-Ferengi woman, right? So he did have a very conventionally attractive other alien wife, but there was a reference either in the marriage episode or before that to father having a marriage contract with the mother of his
Oh,
son to have a
yeah.
child. So it was a 1-year marriage contract where they would be married for a year out of it, right? Or however long it took for them to have a kid. And then he would keep his son, and then the mother would continue the contract. And apparently the father fell in love and wanted to stay married, but she, again, wasn't presented ever on screen and was just as per the way the species was normally depicted.
Well,
So there was a mother contractual. It was literally described as being contractual.
well, thank you very much. You answer all the
That's
Ferengi questions that I always had when I was a little child. So I really wondered that. And but I mean, maybe it was that they wanted to write that as a homosexual relationship, but then because of studio concerns or something, they had to replace it. Have you ever seen, just a side question, have you ever seen the movie Enemy Mine?
no, I haven't.
Uh,
Enemy Mine?
Yeah, that's a movie of the 80s with Dennis Quaid, and he very expensive, and I think actually a very good movie. He actually crashes during a fight with an alien race on a planet, and on this planet he
Yeah.
actually meets a someone from that alien race, and so they kind of become best friends. And he thinks it's a man, but suddenly he gets a
Oh,
baby, and he dies while he gets that baby. It's a great movie.
oh,
It's a really great movie.
oh, okay. I'll have to look it up. Um, so in like the two characters you're talking about, the father and the uncle, so Rom and Quark, um, there was never any queer text per se. Like there was one episode where Quark had a sex change for a business contract, right? Like literally it was for business contract because all of the motivations for most of the species being out of an interest in business. But generally that species was used as a way to present sexism in as being absurd, right? Or like the characters had a very exaggerated sexism that ended up being, it was intended to be comedic, or provide social commentary, just because they would talk about women not being able to have contracts or own property or make money, and sort of being very hidden in society. So they were making social commentary through that species, or using that species to make social commentary, but it was a very exaggerated caricature or humor, and some people people either really loved it or they really hated it,
Mm-hmm.
or they would sort of cringe, but be curious what else the characters would be used to talk about. However, so not in the series was there anything explicitly queer per se, other than the one sex change. Although there was one female character who was doing drag, and that was seen as very taboo, but not because she was doing drag, but because the species was so sexist that the thought of men talking to women as equals was horrific. But so as a kid, and this is kind of embarrassing, one of the books, but one of the books that was being published when the series was still out, which was written by a couple of the creators and Armin Shimmerman, the actor who played Quark, went through like the codex of rules that society was based on, the rules of acquisition. And one of the rules was never sleep with someone, always sleep with the boss. So it was something like never sleep with the boss's sister, never sleep with the boss's wife, always sleep with the boss. Like something stupid like that. And so like one of the book commentary on these rules said, well, the society is male dominated, and men do this and men do that, and all of the managers are male, and so all of the the bosses are male, so the line always sleep with the boss. And then so it was like everyone knows it but no one talks about it, and that was it. So like, I mean, in terms of homoeroticism, there are some scenes where that's kind of developed, but less so than like in Deep Space Nine. There were other characters that were more overtly queer, but it was another example where they used the species to provide social commentary. Humanity is being evolved and developed, or most of the time presented humanity as being evolved or developed, and that's radically different than what we get in Picard, where humans are presented as being mercurial and concerned about money and having avarice and being motivated by material possessions, right? Which
okay, so there,
I think in the
yeah.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
I mean, there are still a lot of questions. We see that all these races in the Star Trek universe are actually used to represent what could be better about humanity, what could be a better humanity. And there's a very interesting episode. I'm sorry?
With humanity, sorry. Or representing problems that exist with humanity.
Yeah, in our current humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I would say there's another very interesting episode. It's called it's episode 26. It's the final episode of season 1, and I think we should talk about that next. But I think first we should take a short break. So thank you everyone for watching. Tune in for the next episode, and if you like that, then like, share, and subscribe. Bye bye.